Hello, hello. Welcome to the Mio 1 MMA podcast, breaking down UFC. What number are we at? I probably should have committed that to memory. 310. You would think I would have that down on memory, but no, not quite. This is a bit of a weird card in the sense that you have a main event between Alexandre Pantoja and Kai Asakura, flyweight title on the line. And of course, the UFC has historically ignored the flyweight division as a actual meaningful main event on pay-per-view sort of option. This goes back to like the Demetrius Johnson days where I don't know, Dana White has developed a serious dissatisfaction with men who are about 125 pounds when they were fighting. That has led to this division being just buried over and over and over again. So this is another example of that where we have a challenger who is coming from the outside from Rizen, as opposed to having worked their way through the UFC, and is getting a title shot on pay-per-view. And they'll probably blame it on the division when it doesn't do very good numbers on the pay-per-view buys. But hey, it's a pretty good card if you ignore that fact. There's no can't miss fight on this card. Like Pantoja Asakura, that's a good fight, that's good, but by the standards of UFC title fights, it has too many unknown variables around it to realistically be like a stoked, I'm looking forward to it, I'm shaking in my boots with anticipation for this fight. And then you have Shavkat Rakhmonov and Ian Garry. That's short notice. That's a little bit, questionable again. Gane versus Volkov is a rematch that makes a ton of sense, and it's been long enough that maybe some things have changed. We'll get into why I think they haven't, but it's interesting now. Bryce Mitchell and Kron Gracie, that has serious downsides, which we'll get into. Nate Landwehr versus Du Ho Choi, that's a dope fight. That's an action fight for the ages. Anthony Smith, Dominic Reyes, yeah, that's a mixed bag. Vicente Luque versus Themba Gorimbo, short notice fight. Better than the fight that was booked, which was Vicente Luque versus Nick Diaz. But I don't know, not amazing. Mozart Evelev versus Aljamain Sterling should be on the main card, all things considered. Probably over the Kron Gracie versus Bryce Mitchell fight because it has title implications in the same division as Gracie versus Mitchell in a way that Gracie Mitchell does not have, let's be clear. So that should be higher up on the card, but that has, I don't know, that's a mixed bag as well. Randy Brown-Bryan battle should be fun. Chris Weidman versus Eric Anders. Don't get me started. I'm going to talk about that fight as little as possible. Cody Durden, Joshua Vant. That's fun. That's cool. Michael Chiesa, Matt Griffin. Could be good, but it's kind of a weird one where you have Griffin, who is a little bit on the old side, and Chiesa, who is basically a part-time fighter at this point. Clay Guida, Chase Hooper that should be reasonably fun as well. Kennedy and Nzechukwu versus Lucas Bresky. That's a fine heavyweight fight, I guess. Bit weird that Bresky's not just fighting Rizvan Kuniev, though, because Kuniev was going to fight Martin Budai on the card. Bresky was going to fight Taliesin Teixeira. Budai and Teixeira pulled out. So you would think that Bresky versus Kuniev would have been the booking, but they came up with Kennedy and Nzechukwu instead, which is a bit weird. And of course, some other things have fallen apart. This fight was supposed to be headlined by Shavkat Rakhmonov challenging Bilal Muhammad for the welterweight title. Muhammad pulled out with a bone infection in his foot. And Tatiana Suarez was supposed to fight Verna Jandiroba in what was, one would hope, a title eliminator at 115. And that's not happening now. So there you go, because Tatiana Suarez got hurt again. And that's kind of the problem. I've kind of noticed this a lot. People are constantly asking why we aren't getting Weili Zhang defending her title. And if I may be so bold, I think the issue is that Tatiana Suarez is the person that the UFC wants to give that title shot to, and she keeps getting hurt. So I think that's the problem. I think that is it in a nutshell. And that the whole conspiracy talks about it are a bit weird, because there are people suggesting she might have failed the drug test or something, or there's some kind of weird politics, or she's ducking people or whatever. I just think that the opponent that they want to put her against can't seem to stay healthy long enough to get into the cage. And they don't want to book that title shot until that happens. That's just my thought. That's my opinion. Now, if I was the UFC, I would just book Jandiroba for a title shot. And to be honest, I think Weili Zhang would easily defend the belt in that situation. But hey, you do what you can do. You keep the title active. That's just my thoughts. We know that the UFC doesn't take my mindset at all in their decision making. See the UFC heavyweight title and the interim title. So let's get into the usual disclaimer here. I'm going to talk about betting. I'm going to talk about betting odds. I'm going to talk about what I'm going to bet on. I'm going to talk about all of these things that pertain to the art of betting on MMA. However, you should not be betting massive quantities of money on MMA. This is an inherently unpredictable sport that you should not be throwing like $5,000, $10,000, anything like that on. No. Bet what you can afford to lose. There you go. And maybe that for you is $10,000. But if it is, give me money then. I guess, in a nutshell. So there you go. Main event, Alexandre Pantoja defending his title against Kai Asakura. I'm super excited to have Kai Asakura in the UFC. I'm thrilled for the title shot because I'm a big Rizen fan. And I'm a big Asakura fan. He's a super exciting fighter. He's got all the hallmarks of like a fun addition to the division. I do wish it was Kyoji Horiguchi instead, just because I do think Horiguchi is the better fighter. Asakura's gone 1-1 against him, so there's some backing the results up from that. But there are a lot of massive question marks on this. One, Asakura has not fought at 125 since 2017. That's a 7-year gap. That is frankly concerning. Now, he has been fighting at like 130 and so on. I think he'll make the weight. I'm not questioning that. But it does mean that you're coming into the UFC in a new environment, which we'll get to in a second, and you're going to go make a weight that you have not made in 7 years. That is an interesting decision. On top of that, this is a title shot for him in a cage, and I don't know what his experience in a cage is like, because all the fights I've ever seen for Asakura, and I went back and looked up a couple of them in preparation for this, obviously, have been in rings. And to make it worse, a lot of his takedown defense tends to involve the ring. So for those who do not know, the issue with wrestling in a cage, and the reason why it favors the takedowner versus the takedownee, is that you get herded towards the fence and you can't go anywhere. You can't put your hips back any further because there's a fence there. It's resisting you. It's a relatively stable barrier that you can't go backwards on. So even if you've stuffed the takedown nice and strong, there is that boundary that the wrestler can push you into and eventually complete the takedown. So it's a very big deal for anti-wrestling game that whether you were in a ring or a cage. And that's the thing, is that if you watch Asakura's fights in Rizen, he'll throw his butt and his hips out between the ropes to try to like stay standing, which you can do. It's legal, but it doesn't really replicate to the cage. So that's an interesting idea. You're getting a title shot in the UFC in the cage. And we saw this back in the Pride merger days. There were a lot of fighters that came over from Pride, and people blame like all kinds of things. Obviously, Pride wasn't very good. They couldn't do steroids because of the USADA drug testing and all of that. And there's probably some things about that. And then there's obviously just age. But some of it was that guys had developed games that worked really, really well in a ring and did not translate to the cage. Mirko Cro Cop was a great example of that. You watch how Cro Cop fought in a ring with like angles and stuff, and then you watch how it just never really clicked in the UFC, and you'll get a great example of what I mean by that. So there is that. And there's also a problem here that fundamentally comes in, is that Asakura is a guy who doesn't really deny wrestling injuries. He relies on counter wrestling, counter scrambling sort of thing. It's, I don't deny you the ability to shoot on me. I just make you regret shooting on me. And I don't think that really works with Pantoja, because Pantoja, for all of his flaws, and there are some, and I'll get into them, is a guy who is going to absolutely have the determination and the scrambling upside that he is going to go for it. He is going to make things happen when it comes to getting things to the ground and, action happening. That's a hallmark of his skill set. Now, what could happen, though, is Asakura is the rare case of a one-punch knockout power guy at flyweight. This dude hits people, and it's a traumatic experience for them. It's kind of close to It's closer to a Davidson Figueiredo than you would generally think. I guess that's the best example I have. And Figueiredo was one of the few people who managed to give Pantoja durability issues. So there is that. And then on top of that, you have the fact that Asakura is a good scrambler and, all those fun. But the thing is that Pantoja is going to bring a pace to Asakura. Asakura has, in his rising career and in other places, lost stretches of fights, but just not really being active enough. And that was kind of it. It wasn't that the opponent had solved him or that the opponent was delivering a lot. It was the fact that he was just being outworked. And Pantoja will make you pay for that. Also, Asakura, not great at defending kicks. Dude eats a lot of low kicks. He absorbs them fairly well. It's not like you're getting stopped by low kicks or whatever, but like they're not really punished and they're not really discouraged. And as much as Pantoja is not necessarily a huge low kicker, he is a kicker. He will kick the body. He will kick the legs. And that does seem like something that he could probably just use to fill some time up before he like charges in for like another scramble fest and like counter wrestling display. So I'm going with Pantoja. He's very hittable. Defense is not great. Asakura does have that power. Asakura is big. But I do think that there just isn't fundamentally anything that denies Pantoja his game and the game that he has been utilizing as a champion to maintain. And I question, there's a little bit of question of Asakura's cardio going down to 125. There's a little bit of question about how he'll handle the cage, etc. So all of that kind of comes together to me picking Pantoja by decision. That being said, I will not be surprised if Asakura just lights him up. Because like Asakura is something special in terms of physicality. And I'm looking forward to him doing that to some people in the UFC. I just think that probably it's not this fight. Pantoja is a minus 250 to minus 275 favorite. Asakura plus 200 to plus 215. Sounds about right. I could actually see that even being a little bit wider. So I might put a little something on Pantoja. Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Ian Garry. This is a battle of two undefeated fighters that it's not that I don't think that they're good. And it's not that I don't think that they're like going to fight for titles. And I honestly think Rakhmonov's going to win a title. It's just at the same time, I think that they are flawed in ways that I do not trust them to actually fix. I'm surprised. I'm also just surprised this fight got made. Shavkat was supposed to fight Bilal for the title. And career-wise, he should have waited. He should not have taken a short notice opponent. And Garry was booked for a main event against Joaquin Buckley, which was a pretty winnable fight for him. I was going to pick him in that fight. And he's agreed to do this fight instead on short notice, knowing that, well, we'll get into their whole history in a bit. And the UFC had to pull the Colby Covington card to save the Tampa card, and now has this fight instead of a title fight. So it's just kind of weird. Like all parties involved probably should not have wanted this fight to happen right now, and yet it is. So go figure. That's kind of amazing. These two have a long sparring history because they were both at Kill Clef for a period of time. They overlapped. They sparred a lot. They both have talked about it. Basically, Ian Garry got the better of it on the feet. Shavkat got the better of it on the ground. And there is that very, very, very defined idea between the two. Now, that's sparring. This is a fight. This is different. We've seen this. We've seen guys who have like been absolutely boxed in a gym get a fight with the guy who has been just putting them in the box, and then they beat them. So who knows? I mean, the sparring could be entirely not indicative of what actually happens here. But I do think that if you watch their fights, I think everything about their sparring probably lines up with what I'm expecting here, which is Ian Garry is the better striker of the two, technically speaking. Shavkat is incredibly hittable. He does not move his head like at all. He can be lit up at range pretty good. Garry is taller, but Shavkat has the longer reach, so there should be a pretty similar range of engagement between the two. And like I said, neither guy has tasted defeat. And then on the ground, I do think that Shavkat is probably better. I mean, Ian Garry has not been out wrestled by, or has not been out grappled by anyone, obviously. He has not lost. that would be kind of a dead giveaway. But if we look at the guys who he's actually like had any grappling with, it's like Michael Venom Page. It's Michael Venom Page is not a good grappler. Like that's all there is to. That's all I have to say. That apparently there were 2 takedowns in the Neil Magny fight. I didn't rewatch that one. I don't want to. I don't want to rewatch Ian Garry versus Neil Magny. I didn't want to do that. But like, Ken and Song got him down and so on. So I do think that probably the case is that, yeah, indeed, that Shavkat is the better grappler of the two. So you've got Garry, who absolutely obviously can light Shavkat up on the feet because of Shavkat's flaws and Gary's successes. And then you have Shavkat wanting to basically hunt him down, push him to the cage, kind of like I was talking about with Asakura versus Pantoja, that there is a element of cage wrestling that realistically is hard to stop. It favors the guy who can get good positions in the clinch up against the fence. Now, the problem here, and the thing that I think Garry needs to fix, and I have no indication that he is that Garry does have retreating footwork. He does have range maintenance tools with his positioning. The problem is that he will back up to the fence and he will clinch when he's being hunted down towards the cage. And those are both really bad ideas against Shavkat Rakhmonov. Because getting caught up against the cage or clinching with Rakhmonov is a very bad idea. Rakhmonov has one of the scariest clinch games in all of MMA, period, from a wrestling standpoint. This guy is incredibly good at clinch wrestling. And the fact that Garry has ended up in the clinch with, let's just be honest here, lesser clinch fighters it's concerning for this fight. And what I mean by that is, what I mean by Garry not really addressing this is that Garry has elected to go to shoot a box, Charles Oliveira's gym, and try to learn how to become a better grappler is his way of countering like grapplers and people who want to like hunt him down and put him on his back. I don't think that's the right move. I think finding somebody who is going to teach him a more cutting, terminating of the chase footwork as opposed to just constantly retreating kind of coach. I'm trying to think of like a good coach for this. A really good coach for this. I'm trying. It might honestly be like Faraz Ziham at TriStar. Might be. Actually, you know who's probably pretty good would be Trevor Whitman. Actually, Whitman is like really, really. Whitman has his flaws, but he's like a really thinking coach with like good ideas of footwork. But anyways, he's not sought that out. He sought out like just good grappling BJJ training, which is not. It's not a bad idea, but it means that the improvements you're making are almost too late to really make a difference against a guy like Shavkat. So what I'm getting at is that Shavkat Rakhmonov, who has a 100% finishing rate in, I forget which one's 18-0, which one's 15. 18-0, 18 fights, all finishes. And a guy who, for all the crap I have about his striking, it is, I can't emphasize this enough, bad. There is like power and like confidence and aggression to it. And as a result, I can totally see him hunting Garry down, getting him down, and making him pay very, very badly for the mistakes that he makes when it comes to getting close to the cage. So I'm going with Shavkat Rakhmonov by submission. That's the pick. That's what I'm going with. But this is the highest challenge he's faced. Because I'm sorry, in his 40s, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson is not really an elite welterweight. Jeff Neal is not really. Jeff Neal just has the wrong style, really, to beat Rakhmonov as well. So, like, those two big wins, to me, are far below what we're talking about here. But we'll see. We'll see. You could also say that this is far like the biggest challenge of Gary's career as well, of course. Rakhmonov is minus 350 to minus 410. Garry plus 260 to plus 310. There's also the short notice replacement part about this is that maybe if you gave Garry like a full camp, he might actually come up with like solutions with the footwork. but I don't think he does on short notice. Ciryl Gane, Alexander Volkov. I don't have a lot to say about this fight. It is a rematch of a 2021 fight. That's enough time for things to change. I just don't think that they have. I mean, there are some things. Gane has been revealed to have like serious Achilles heels with wrestling. For instance, in Ngannou, John Jones showing that off nicely. Volkov himself has been probably a little bit more exciting. He had that big stoppage of Rosenstruck and Romanov and a win over Pavlovich, which is very cool that I didn't think he would get. So, that's nice. But I don't think the dynamics of the fight has changed. Gane is a fundamental outside striker. Volkov is fundamentally an outside striker. Volkov is slower, less athletic, fights at a lower pace than Gane, and does fade because, what he's doing is, I think, inherently not really something he has the physicality to do over and over. I mean, the Derek Lewis fight, probably a great example of him just, getting tired by being like this, constant, this constantly trying to be explosive kind of style that he has. So, yes, if Volkov could wrestle, and he can, this could be a different fight. Yes, if Volkov can force a closer range aspect of the fight, because Gane, for all the fluidity and grace he has as a range striker, is really bad in the pocket comparatively. Sure, there are paths to win. There are multiple paths for Volkov to make this a closer fight. Actually, a winning fight. Not even close. Because I think if he could get them to where I'm talking, he would actually just win. He still fundamentally doesn't really have a way of doing that. There's no one he does that to. His B game is better in the sense that he can resist other people making him fight his B game more. And you cannot, but there's no way of getting to that point. So, Gane by decision. Gane is minus 350 to minus 410. Volkov plus 260 plus 295. Honestly, closer than I thought it would be given, the first fight. Bryce Mitchell, Kron, Gracie. There is a really good version of this fight where these two guys try to do BJJ against each other. There is a terrible version of this fight where these two try to have the unfortunate grappler kickboxing fight, and they cannot fundamentally strike. There is also a kind of middle ground where Bryce Mitchell kind of locks him down and makes it a wrestler versus BJJ guy. But the wrestler knows how not to get submitted and has actually a good idea of things. And we have the flatter championship of the world. So I'm going to go with Bryce Mitchell. Again, the BJJ version of this fight would be phenomenal. It would be so much fun to see Kron Gracie go out there and just basically have a competitive submission grappling match with Bryce Mitchell. That would be cool. But Bryce Mitchell has the more functional striking game of the two because he can adapt to things, whereas Kron is like an incredibly single-minded individual. And the problem is that single mind is not like, I'm going to become the best fighter possible. It's like, no, I'm going to learn how to throw this complicated left hook setup over and over and over again. And I'm going to train nothing else while I'm doing that. Nothing else at all. Kron Gracie is a fundamentally do not trust fighter. So, Bryce Mitchell, by decision. I will say I was surprised when I looked at the odds of this were minus 770 to minus 900 on Mitchell, and Gracie's plus 480 to plus 600. Bryce Mitchell is a bigger favorite than Ciryl Gane is against Volkov, than Rakhmonov is against a short notice Ian Garry, than Pantoja is against a debuting, never fought in the UFC guy. Then, let me see here. He is I think he's the second biggest favorite on the card. The only bigger favorite is Kennedy not Kennedy. Chase Hooper, which is also very weird. Anyways, bit weird that is that wide, and I'm tempted to throw a kind of throwaway bet on Kron Gracie because I honestly don't think Bryce Mitchell should be that big of a favorite against anybody. Anyways, Nate Landwehr versus Doo Ho Choi. Let's put it out the cards on the table. Can Doo Ho Choi win this fight? Absolutely. We saw Herbert Burns knock out Landwehr early. We saw Julian Erosa knock out Landwehr early. Choi has the power, the violence, the lethality, the creativity, the physical tools, and the technical tools to absolutely do that. But if he does not do that, Landwehr almost certainly wins the fight. Because the problem with Choi is that He is very violent, very powerful, very creative early, and then he fades. And I don't think it's a cardio issue. I don't think it is. I think it's a mental issue. He really loses heart and questions himself when he hits the opponent with his best shots, and they not only survive, but they seem eager for more. They don't back down. They keep coming. And that is Landwehr to a T. Landwehr himself, even I forget what fight it was, but it's like, kick my ass and see what happens. You know? This guy has that dog in him. He has that grit, that mental determination, that toughness. That means that, yeah, sure, I fully believe Doo Ho Choi for the first round of this fight will probably be kicking some butt. He'll be doing some cool things. He'll be hitting some very hard shots, and then Landwehr will just start coming back at him. And Choi's chin is not bad, but it is not the type of chin that handles the brawl with a guy like Landwehr, I think. So Landwehr by TKO. It's going to be a fun fight. It's going to be a dope fight. But I will say this is the worst possible matchmaking if you're trying to, which I guess they're not. That's probably the answer. Doo Ho Choi is 33 now, and they've kind of given up on him as anything but an action fighter, which totally fair. But if you're trying to get Doo Ho Choi a win and trying to build something with him, not what I would be doing. But you know what? It's going to be fun. Then there's Anthony Smith for betting odds. Landwehr is minus 134 to minus 142. Choi is plus 108 to plus 115. Landwehr is bettable at those odds. Anthony Smith versus Dominic Reyes, a pair of guys who fought John Jones for the UFC 205 title. I don't really have anything further for that. Anthony Smith may honestly be one of the worst fighters to have gotten a title shot against a dominant champion. That could be the case. I mean, there are some other candidates. But he is on that list. I was talking about on Twitter with someone about this. I have to pick Reyes, but at the same time, Reyes is coming off of a win over Dustin Jacoby. But before that, it seemed like Reyes was just kind of done. He was over. The post John Jones, post getting, to use the parlance of some people, robbed, had just kind of fallen apart. But then I also kind of realized that you're fighting Jan Blachowicz, Yuri Prohaska, Ryan Spahn. These are all very, very dangerous fighters. So coming back, beating Dustin Jacoby, maybe there's hope yet. Smith doesn't have that kind of violence in him in terms of lethality. He just doesn't have that physicality. That's the thing. It's not a mental problem. Smith is tough as all heck and an insane mental requirements as a fighter. But Reyes is the bigger fighter. He does have he has the longer reach than Smith, which has historically been something Smith doesn't deal well with. It's not an instant win, obviously. Smith beat Ryan Spahn twice, who is taller, but he's never been very, very comfortable when people can just outrange him, and Reyes can do that. And Reyes is a better athlete. So is the Dustin Jacoby thing a sign that Reyes is putting things together again? Maybe. A lot of Smith's wins tend to be about the other person falling apart, which does seem like something Reyes could obviously do. But I'm going to go with Reyes by decision. He's minus 333 to minus 360. Smith plus 250 to plus 280. Sounds about right. Then we have another short notice fight here. Vicente Luque versus Themba Gorimbo. Thank God we're not getting Luque versus Nick Diaz. Oh my God, I didn't want to see that. I had no interest. Nick Diaz should not be fighting anybody right now. Nick Diaz is in a bad place. Anyways, this feels like a potentially sad fight still because I could totally see Themba Gorimbo winning. And I like Gorimbo's story. Obviously, it's a feel-good thing with the rags to riches nature of it. But at the same time, beating Vicente Luque, a prime Vicente Luque, Gorimbo doesn't feel like he's capable of that at all. So the depression is that this does feel like Luque is headed downhill a little bit. That being said, not Luque versus Diaz, so upgrade. Luque is the better fighter in his prime, the more dynamic striker, the better striker, the more powerful striker, the more dangerous striker, and also, the god of the Darce choke. But since 2022, the brain bleed and a couple of flat performances, I don't know. It's been a while since we've seen Luque look good. It's been a while. We've seen him win, obviously, against RDA, but he hasn't looked good. That's the question. Garimbo, though, is just kind of like really predictable. Like, reasonably athletic fighter and everything, but like a guy who it took him a while to get to like an actual functional style. Like he's 33 years old and still feels like a developing prospect, even though by definition he is not. So there is that. For shits and giggles, purely that, I'm going to go with Luque by submission. I'm going to go with him to get Garimbo's neck in a compromising position and pounce on it and get the job done. I'm just hoping we go out there and Garimbo looks like improved and like, improving, and Luque doesn't look done. Like, I think that would be the win for us as fans. So Garimbo is the minus 150 to minus 172 favorite. Luque plus 123 to plus 136. Probably one of the few underdogs on this card that I'm fairly confident about. Well, no, not even confident about, but picking. I will say the underdog I am confident about, though, is Aljamain Sterling, who's coming in at plus 185 to plus 215 against a minus 225 to minus 290 Movsar Evloev. Here's the thing about Evloev. If he could be dangerous, I don't even mean finishes, but if he could just be dangerous at a UFC level, I would probably pick him a lot more. As it stands, he's a control grappler. Very textbook. Don't get me wrong. Very textbook. Even his like striking is fairly good on a technical, like, here's what you want to look like striking approach. And a very good control grappler. Very good wrestler. But there's just no danger. And at 145, I don't think it works. You know what I'm saying? I just don't think so. Aljamain Sterling coming up for 135, I still think is a problem, obviously, because a lot of his game at 135 was just being strong, powerful, brute force, wrestler, takedowns. The guys who usually benefit about being bigger than their opponent in a big way. So there is that. But Sterling did look good against Calvin Kattar. So he looked strong. He looked like part of it was Kattar looking bad, but like, he still looked strong. He looked confident. He looked able to lock up with people and bring them to the mat. So Evloev is going to probably have to grapple with him, going to have to wrestle with him. And I actually think that that's a perfect recipe for Sterling. I don't know how to explain it any further. It just kind of like clicks in my brain that I'm just like, Sterling is the better suited for this type of fight. Now, to be clear, I think that Evloev would probably beat a lot of people that would beat Sterling because he has tools that Sterling just doesn't have. Sterling's boxing is not good. Not good. It's got power, but it's not good. It's technically quite flawed and defensively quite flawed. But like Evloev doesn't have the ability, doesn't have the power to actually make him pay for that. So there you go. Sterling by decision is the pick. Randy Brown, Bryan Battle. I don't have a ton to say about this fight other than like, I just don't believe in Bryan Battle. I freely admit that he's overachieved what I thought he was going to do. Like he came off of Ultimate Fighter and I was just like, this guy's going to be done. But like, he's done well, but a lot of his ability still is physical in nature, power in nature, and frame in nature. That he's 6'1" with a 77-inch reach. Like that he is huge for welterweight. Randy Brown is one of the few guys that is bigger than him and is athletic and is explosive and is fast and is powerful and is strong. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just feels like Randy Brown kind of like does everything a little bit better than Bryan Battle. Like, Battle is probably a better guard grappler, but like, does that matter? Not really. Randy Brown does have some problems though, like where he'll just like sort of like decide that he has to do something different. He has to like try something new, do something that he wasn't doing before, go away from what was working. It's really frustrating, but I don't know. I just obviously like Battle could catch him with something. Obviously, that's on the table. He's a powerful guy and all, but like Brown is pretty durable unless your name is Jack Della Maddalena. And his only losses are to JDM and like Vicente Luque in recent memory. He also has that weird like knockout loss to. He's the one that got knocked out from bottom by Nico Price, right? Am I correct about that? Yeah, I am. Hammer fist from bottom position. Yeah, that was weird. And then like Bilal Muhammad has a random loss to Mike Graves. That is so weird. He was super young in 2016, but like in the last like 5 years, his only losses are to the still elite Vincente Luque and Jack Della Maddalena. So I don't know. I just don't see Brian Battle on that level. I could be wrong. You know what? I honestly kind of hope to be wrong, because if I'm wrong, it means Brian Battle might actually be like someone really to be excited about. Like that he's going places. Battle is the favorite at minus 218 and minus 230. Brown is plus 172 to plus 185. So yeah, I'll be rocking those two underdogs, Randy Brown and Aljamain Sterling, pretty hard. Chris Weidman versus Eric Andrews. Andrews by decision. I am not talking about that any further. I have no interest in it. I guess the only thing would be I could look up, hang on. What were the betting odds last time, and have they like changed this time? There's no reason they would. I don't think. Okay, Weidman is less of a underdog this time around. Last time he closed at minus 107 to plus 105. This time he's closing at minus 110 to minus 120. Okay. So yeah, he's become the favorite, I guess. Anders minus 102 to minus 112. Yeah, I'm still going with Anders. Weidman is very, very Weidman should be gone. That's all there is to it. Cody Durden versus Joshua Van, which is the last like super interesting fight on the card. Fun wrestler versus striker. Durden is the textbook wrestler boxer archetype. There's nothing surprising. There's nothing new. There's nothing transformative about him, but it is effective. He works aggressively. He works at a high pace. He melds his boxing into takedowns actually pretty well. And he's just generally pretty hard to beat, pretty annoying to fight. And Van's been taken down. He's been taken down by Felipe Bunis and Zhalgas Zhumagulov, so obviously it can happen. But he's a good counter grappler. He's a good scrambler. He's good at getting off his bottom. And as fights go on, he tends to get stronger and stronger and stronger and find like patterns to break people down and hit with counters and pick up the pace. And like I said, there's not a lot to adapt to Durden with. So that feels like a great recipe for him to start taking over late and kind of getting the job done here. So I'm going with Joshua Van by decision. Van is not a huge power puncher. He's not a huge finisher. Durden is still quite durable, though he did get knocked out by Bruno Silva. So it could happen. But I'm going to go with Joshua Van by decision to pass yet another hurdle and continue on his run up the division that was briefly hiccuped by that loss to Charles Johnson. Van is minus 150 to minus 182. Durden is plus 123 to plus 130. Michael Chiesa versus Max Griffin is a battle of kind of done, if we're being honest, like kind of older fighters. But, it's still interesting enough. Like, my main concern here is that Max Griffin does not avoid the clinch very well at all. He embraces it. He tries to weaponize it. And that means that, Jeremiah Wells can take him down and Tim Means can take him down and so on. Like, it's going to give Michael Chiesa the options to do the one thing that he is very good at, which is clinch wrestling into scrambles, into attacking the neck. Like, that is what he does. That is the only thing he does. His striking is not very effective at all, outside of being a big dude. It's honestly amazing that this dude made, at 6'1", 75.5-inch reach, that he made 155. That is insane. Like, you look at him at 170 and he still looks big. And he did it on the Ultimate Fighter Live Season 2. How? But I am taking Griffin. Why am I taking Griffin? Griffin does have the more functional striking game. And the thing with Chiesa is that his only win in the last 4 years is Tony Ferguson. He's a part-time fighter, more or less full-time pundit at this point. He's nearing retirement. It's kind of like if Paul Felder fought or Dominic Cruz fought or Michael okay. Bisping and Cormier are like a step further down the road, but like it's like when finding Cruz fighting or whatever, they're just kind of they're diminished versions of themselves because they're not fully, they're not fully committed to the game anymore. They're not developing, they're not showing anything new. You know exactly what you're going to get from them. And I think if you know what you're getting with Chiesa and you can game plan around it, and despite the fact that Griffin is actually the older fighter, you can just kind of outwork him. Like Chiesa's problem is he's also like just falling apart in fights more or less recently. So Griffin by decision. Chiesa's stoppages are all like sub heavy, and Griffin doesn't sub people. So I think it goes the distance. But you know what? If Chiesa can do some things, who knows? Griffin did lose to 2022 Neil Magny, so the door is open. Griffin is the underdog, minus 125 to plus 100. Or, well, no, I think he's the favorite technically because Chiesa's minus 120 to plus 100. So they get as far down as each other, and Griffin has a higher threshold. Clay Guida versus Chase Hooper. I'm not picking 52-year-old Clay Guida to win fights. That's the bottom line. He could try and strike with Hooper. Please don't. I don't need another Clay Guida versus Rafa Garcia fight where it's just depressing. And I would like to see Hooper try to scramble with this guy and like try to do some things and try and get a submission or get on top and like, do some damage or whatever. I'm going with Hooper by submission. That being said, I'm going to say this right now. This is a weird take because I really don't even want to think about what a Clay Guida win looks like here. But like the fact that Hooper is minus 1,000 to minus 1,250 is insane. Guida is plus 600 to plus 750. And then we have a heavyweight fight between Kennedy and Nzechukwu versus Lucas Bresky. I'm still not sold on Nzechukwu as a heavyweight, but he is still huge. He is athletic. He is explosive. And Bresky just doesn't feel like the kind of guy who's going to take the punishment and actually keep coming up back at him. Because like that's the problem for Nzechukwu is that he kind of like falls apart. He has a little bit of the Doo Ho Choi problem. Where like he seems to kind of like lose a little bit of something when the guy keeps surviving. But Bresky is coming off of getting dismantled by Waldo Cortez Acosta and by Mick Parkin. So yeah, I don't think that's really going to be a problem. So Kenny and Nzechukwu, faster, better athlete, better ground game probably. Not really much of a worse striker. I mean, I guess Bresky is a little bit more textbook sound, but you're dealing with a 6'5" guy, 83-inch reach, who's actually really, really athletic and hits very hard. I got to go with Nzechukwu. I suppose what I'm saying is I don't necessarily not believe in him at heavyweight. I just don't think it takes him any higher. I think he's going to hit the exact same like he's going to headbutt the exact same like ceiling, I guess, at heavyweight that he did at 205. That's what I'm getting at. So Nzechukwu by TKO, he's minus 549 to minus 670. Bresky plus 400 to plus 475. That is the fight card. I hope you enjoyed it. And here's hoping that the fights are good because, I think that there's a very, very good card in this. Down below or in the description of this video or podcast, you will find links to my social medias. I really need to create a Blue Sky at some point. Maybe I'll have a Blue Sky up before this card. And I will be doing over on Twitter and possibly Blue Sky, little like round by round summaries and scorings if you want to check that out. Also, there's the MMA Discord server, which is home to my fight simulator. If you want to create a fighter and go through a career and see how it goes, play a little D&D MMA style, please feel free. There's also my video gaming stuff down there as well. If you would like more of me in a non-MMA context, although the MMA does bleed over into that a fair bit. Till then, enjoy the fights.